Howdy, folks. The Wild and Woolly Ozarks is a podcast dedicated to the Ozarks, the land, and the people. Here we specialize in stories with bark on them. We delve into topics best left alone and wander down historical rabbit holes. History, lore, we love it, especially when they come together. We have a great deal of fun telling old stories from spooky to strange with a couple of dirty ones thrown in for good measure. So what kind of a podcast is it? A podcast that gives you the unvarnished backstory. A podcast that wants to talk about Spanish treasure, ghosts, monsters, myths, and legends. How about Civil War atrocities, robberies, and murder from settlement to date? What about newspaper sensations from the past and unsolved mysteries that still linger? We want you to join us as we explore these wild tales, often with intriguing guests and an endless supply of curiosity. Pull up a chair and sit a spell. You're now in the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. Gentle people, gather up the kids and the old folks, shut down the contraptions and dim the lights, put away the pocket-sized magic lantern shows and close your eyes and listen. It's time to experience stories from the hills and hollers, the river banks and the brush. It's time to venture into the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Heron. Welcome, folks. Glad to be back. Fall is upon us soon. 2 weeks it's going to be here. And we are going to be getting a little spooky with the podcast. We have planned some fun topics and amazing guests who will join us on the WWO. Maybe we could have a live event on Halloween night. Maybe a ghost walk in my hometown, which is Marshfield, in case you're interested. I'll show you where Dick Cullen did actually get lynched. If we get enough stories to share, how about a live event? Maybe a ghost storytelling. I think that would be fun. Send me your thoughts. I hope today's episode also causes you to look on the wild and woollier side. Folks, a little bit of housekeeping here. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. We will alert you as we migrate to other platforms. Look there for upcoming and new episodes. Follow us where you get your podcasts. And if you have a story to share, drop us a line at wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. That's not an and, folks. That's wildinwoollyozarks@gmail.com. And now for the program. Gentle people, my first introduction as a teenager to the murder of Kelle Ann Workman at the Dogwood Cemetery in Douglas County is a memory of articles of the News Leader and the nightly saga that we saw played out on KY3 of her disappearance and ultimately murder. These now seem in my memory like Polaroids or old film replays, not so much about the content, but rather that it happened, and it was never solved. 36 years later, I look back on this, and I look at where I reacquired the Kelle Ann Workman case. Relocating to Seymour, Missouri in the late 90s, or rather the rural Webster County, the Seymour area, I reacquired the struggle to identify Kelle's murderers with a subscription to the Webster County Citizen, a 118-year-old institution that still reports on the news and is an integral part of the community. For the next 25 years, I followed the Seymour paper, as it's locally known, as they carried the torch and continued to advocate on her behalf and bring her killers to justice. Joining me today is Dan Wehmer, editor of the Webster County Citizen, and a gentleman I've had the privilege of knowing for some time. Dan, I'm looking here. You've put some headlines in front of me. Kelle's killers caught, and I have one I brought with me, the latest No Deal Bobby, about a plea agreement. And this has been going on a long time. This has been going on the majority of my adult life, or all of my adult life, back when I was a teenager. You're not too much different in age than I am, so I'm sure it's similar. Would you give us a little background of how you got here to the Seymour paper to begin with, and then where you picked up the Kelle Ann Workman case?
Yeah, well, I came to Seymour in the mid-'90s, I think in 1995, and worked for Gary and Helen Sosnicki, who owned the paper at the time. I was fresh out of college, and I picked up the Workman story because every year at that time, they would, in June, do an annual update of the case. So I did that for a few years, and then after the Sosnickis sold the newspaper and I became the publisher and ultimately the owner, we started as different anniversaries took place, we would step up the coverage. That started with the 10-year anniversary in 1999, and then subsequently we did similar type editions in 2004, 2009. I had a reporter here who worked for me, actually as my news editor, a fellow named Fred Spriggs. And Fred and I both worked the case pretty hard. We went through all of the investigative files, the ones that we could get our hands on. And we found witnesses, and we conducted our own interviews. And oftentimes we found that we were talking to witnesses that law enforcement had even spoken to. So I think that we were starting to kind of break some ground, develop new leads. But we're kind of like everybody in this case. We thought ultimately this isn't going to be solved. The crime occurred at a triangle of Christian, Webster, and Douglas counties, and it's sort of odd how it all occurred. Elements of the crime occurred in 3 different counties, and jurisdiction was given to Douglas. And when the case broke in '89, the sheriff there was a fellow named Roldan Turner, super good guy. He actually was a filling station operator, and back then sheriffs didn't have to have post-certification. So he's sort of elected from the street, took over from a 20-year incumbent named Leonard Sanders, who was kind of an old school sheriff. And so Roldan, it was in his jurisdiction, but at the time, Christian County had a sheriff, Steve Whitney, who had his own set of problems related to a variety of things. There was some civil action waged against him. But anyway, he wanted the case. They sort of fought over it. The Webster County Sheriff at the time was a guy named Bill John, who affectionately known in the county as Bronco Billy. And
that could almost be another episode.
That could, and I could be a great person to talk to on that. But Bill was busy seizing vehicles on the highway and seizing Broncos and driving them around and toting AK-47s on the courthouse steps. So essentially what happened was it was a lot, that time element when a crime occurs and when a body's found, there's about a 10-day span there. There wasn't really any hard police work being done, or at least not productive. And that crucial time period slipped away. And there were attempts over the next decade until about 2000 to convene grand juries. I know they tried to do that in Christian County on one occasion, but nothing could ever get any traction. The prime suspects always were Bobby and Dwight Banks, both of whom are from here in Seymour, both of whom, by their own admission, saw Kelle the day she disappeared at the Dogwood store. But over the years, Gerald Carnahan became a suspect at one point. A fellow named Terry Walker, who owned the Dogwood store, was a suspect at one point. There were several different suspects, but at the end of the day, it washed out sort of like probably 9% of the public thought, which was that the Banks brothers committed this crime.
There was also at that time, you talk about Gerald Carnahan. There was just sort of and ultimately the 3 missing women in Springfield, there was just a period of there where these horrible crimes were happening to women. You have Jackie Johns, which ultimately Gerald Carnahan went to prison for, I think. And you have Kelle Ann Workman, and you had several others. I think I have that right. It was Jackie Johns.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct.
But I don't know. I think pre-internet, watching the 3 channels and reading the newspaper, it just seemed like it drug on and on and on. And really, it was only her body was discovered.
Talk about Kelle?
Yeah,
so Kelle disappeared.
2 weeks.
It was shorter than that. It was about a week later her body was found on an old, essentially, I guess you would call it an old log road. It was a shallow ditch. and there was water in it when they found her body. She was very decomposed. There wasn't a lot of forensic evidence that could be taken.
No DNA, no way to do it.
No, and then, of course, her body was found in Christian County. She was abducted in Douglas County at the Dogwood store, very, very close to the Webster County line. So yeah, that again, you had multiple agencies working it. Ultimately, Christian County took charge of the investigation from the onset because the body was found near Oldfield.
So let's go from there. When the investigation started, take us from there until the case kind of goes cold. What happens?
Well, in Missouri, like out many states, your sheriffs are elected, and so there were regime changes. Steve Whitney lasted, I think, one term, and they've been through a plethora of sheriffs over there.
Mm-hmm.
Same with prosecuting attorneys. In the late 90s, there was a pretty aggressive prosecuting attorney over there named Susan Spence who really wanted to solve the case. Her predecessor, Mark Orr, wasn't so gung-ho. Then after Susan, sort of that fire was lost. In Douglas County, Roldan Turner served a term or maybe two. And then Gary Coop was elected. And then after Gary Coop, Krista Gase. And then in Webster, we had C. Wells, who followed Bill John, and then Ron Worsham, and then now Roy Cole. It was Christian County's case for a long time, and then when DeGase became sheriff in Douglas, he made a run at it, and Chris did some really good work. I really like to compliment Chris DeGase. I think he's one of the best sheriffs in Missouri. I call him a law dog. He's just persistent. He's sort of an old school sheriff, but he's intelligent. And he had worked through a lot of their drug work down there. He'd caught a lot of stories and he started working angles, but he was bird dog focused on the banks. And a lot of Christian County investigation, I don't think jived with that. They kind of got off track. And this is when it gets cold because, listen, Dwight had run a extremely effective PR campaign for 3 decades, soliciting interviews with the news leaders, soliciting interviews with us, soliciting interviews with KY3. I remember we helped set him up for an interview with Tony Beeson out here on the gazebo, here on the square. And he told a great tale. He was a king of conspiracy theories.
Let's go into the actual perpetrators because we know it's solved. Yeah. So let's go through there and then circle back through this cat and mouse game, which lasts 2 decades or more.
3 decades.
3 decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I think the case, if we're talking about what led to the arrests, what led to the grand jury, a few factors are key here. Number one, Douglas County takes the case over. Number two, you've got a really aggressive, smart sheriff in Douglas County with Krista Gase. You also have a very aggressive prosecutor, a fellow named Matt Weatherman, who is, again, just a real black and white prosecutor and a guy who's not afraid to go to trial. Many prosecutors, I believe, don't like the trouble and potential embarrassment of going to trial, so they don't file a lot of cases at the level they should be filed. They plead them out.
Right.
Weatherman was an aggressive guy on wanting this thing solved. But the biggest factor is a guy, a retired FBI agent named Chris Holland. And he's sort of the guy you don't hear a lot about, but I'm here to tell you he is a key. Chris is a phenomenal investigator. He was with the FBI, retired, went to work for the state, and used his purview in the state job to sort of snatch this case and conduct his own investigation, assisted by a lady named Leslie Albrecht, who also is an investigator. And he came to see me probably now 2-3 years ago, probably 3 years ago, and wanted to know more about it, and ended up spending 4 or 5 days in this office going through all of my files. And then we dug out all of our we call it the alibi. For each edition, we have all the notes and copies. So I went and found the alibis from going back to 99 when we did our 10-year anniversary stories, because we had interviewed Dwight Banks. We'd interviewed Wiley Belt, who also was arrested when they made the arrest. We had interviewed Terry Walker. We had interviewed Ernie Stahl, who was a neighbor. We had ended up interviewing Fred Spriggs and I about 15 different people, all of whom had deep ties to Kelle Workman or had seen her that day. And we had noted that Dwight's timeline didn't add up. We never thought it did. I even wrote a column about it one time, and this is probably 15 years ago, where I had said I think he killed her, and which got a visit from him, oddly enough. But anyway, Chris Holland,
Dwight, though, you all had sort of a relationship.
Yeah.
Dwight.
Oh, yeah.
Dwight was in and out of here. When I worked in town, I had an encounter with Dwight, and 6 sentences or so into our conversation, he told me he was not responsible for the murder.
Oh, yeah.
He was not. That was always at the front of his mind as proving he was innocent.
Listen, every June he would come to us. Of course, the anniversary is at the end of June, and he would come to us early in June every year for many years and say, "Hey, we doing a recap story? Hey, I've got some stuff." He'd come in with a folder of stuff or some notebook with all of his theories, and he'd go on the record and talk about it. And as a matter of fact, Dwight even would lead us to witnesses that would allegedly corroborate what he was doing, which, again, when we dig into it, his story didn't add up. And then he would tell tales of how people were shooting up his home. He was implying that Stanley and Joanne Workman were doing that, which is absolutely ridiculous. Joanne and Stanley are kind, peaceful people. They don't even own firearms that are, that he alleged his home was being shot with.
Did he enjoy it? Did he enjoy the cat and mouse game, or was he just scared?
Listen, this guy was, I think it maybe went from being scared to, he loved it, because
he liked the fame.
Let's be honest about Dwight Banks. He's a total zero. His whole life is a failure, and he's a horrible human being. Poor parent, as best I can tell, a poor human being, a poor husband, had a spotty track record of working, and but this was his 10 minutes of fame every year. Even though it was framed, that he was a suspect in this, he loved playing jailhouse lawyer and trying to exonerate himself, and best of all, he loved being quoted and seeing his name in print. He loved the television interviews. So, Christ, you can go through the files of the News Leader or my newspaper or even some of the video files of KY3. You'll find Dwight Banks all over the place. He was, even 417 magazine came out. Ron Davis, who did an old newsletter reporter at 417.
Were they ranking local criminals?
Well, almost. It was crazy. So we get to Holland, and Holland starts piecing a lot of this together, and he starts
Let me
doing
ask one question.
Yeah.
Did Bobby Banks or Wiley Belt, the two others that charged now and actually have we're still trying to finish this up, but with their sentencing and all.
So what they're going to do with Banks or with Belt is they're going to drop the charges on Belt. They don't think Belt ultimately had anything to do with this. He was indicted in the grand jury, and that's kind of some inside information. But as you see in the headlines there, he currently is charged. But they're going to drop those. I can say that with confidence.
Is there not enough evidence to link him to the crime?
I just don't think that. I think he was their cohort, and I think he probably had knowledge of what happened, but was he directly involved?
Okay.
Prosecutors don't think so. But I know you're going to ask, and I'll answer them even though you haven't asked it. Bobby Banks never would speak to us on record. Never. In 30 plus years, 35 years, Bobby Banks would never go. We'd try to interview him, and he was very, very, very direct. I'm not talking to you.
So one brother really almost gets off on it, and the other one won't.
Yeah, the other one won't say a word.
Did he ever threaten you? Did Bobby Banks ever threaten you or anything?
Not that I mean, maybe he did, and I don't know about it. But during all this, I lived out on AB Highway at the time, and my home was shot through a couple of different times, but I can't prove who did that, although it was always at the same time of the Banks stories.
Yeah.
But now Bell did talk to us in 99. Fred and I interviewed Wiley. And here's the problem with Wiley that we ran into. So, the abduction and murder occurred in 89. In the early 90s, Wiley had a bad auto accident that left him, his brain was damaged. He's not fully functioning. It hasn't been since. And when we interviewed him, we could tell that his elevator doesn't go to the top. And besides that, he was physically maimed by the accident. He's a kind of a tall fella. Wiley's probably 6'4", 6'5", and he was kind of hunched over and in pretty bad physical condition. So he wasn't really too useful in interview. And I can remember after we interviewed him, I said, I don't think this guy was involved. I think he was their running buddy, but I didn't think he was. I thought he was a non-factor, which I think is going to play out to be the case.
Was Wiley Belt and the Banks, this is a rumor that I've always heard, and I don't know that, maybe you've addressed it in the paper, maybe you've not, I don't remember. Were they running drugs?
That was the allegation. I can't say one way or the other if that was happening. There were also allegations that the Dogwood store was a distribution point, and perhaps it was. I think that has to be a sidebar, because I don't think that Kelly's abduction had to do anything with her seeing something that she shouldn't have saw, like a drug deal.
Okay.
I think it was more a crime of opportunity. She was mowing over there at the church, and she was an attractive, Kelly's 6 foot tall and was a cute girl, 24 years old. She lived at home with her parents. She was developmentally, she was a little bit slower. I wouldn't say that she was mentally retarded. I don't think that's accurate. I think that she was just a late bloomer, a slow developer, and subsequently that leaves her to be very naive and very probably trusting. And she was mowing over at the church that day, and it was a warm summer day, and here are these two yahoos running around, and I think they kind of look around and say, hey, there's nobody around here. Let's go snatch her and have our way with her. And I think that's exactly what happened to her. I think she was abducted and raped and then ultimately killed. And I've talked to enough people. I do feel like I know how she was murdered. They have a direct witness, a person who saw the crime, and that was provided to the grand jury. The witness was a child at the time, but what he saw he's very clear about that, and he will note who was present, which was Bobby and Dwight. He can testify that they raped her, and he can testify that Bobby ultimately killed her with a blow to the head. He delivered the death blow to Kelly.
So was he with them in the truck, or was he where they took her?
He was where they took her. The witness was.
Okay.
Yeah, witness was. And actually at the last, when we thought we were going to have a plea agreement, earlier this summer in Ava, Douglas County Courthouse before Judge Carter. He was there. The witness was there. He was in court, and he is a Banks family member. I'll say that. And he was, present, and I'm sure that if this goes to trial, which it looks like we're going to do, a trial date has been set for this fall. He's going to be the star witness, because Carter wouldn't accept the plea as it was presented. He didn't think it was enough time, and so we're going to trial now. We'll see. I still think they'll plea it before the trial's held.
Good for Carter, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
15 years he didn't think was enough.
Yeah, and
because I don't
36 years is too much.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a second degree murder. Dwight took the plea earlier this year. Dwight has already pled out. He's in the DOC now, and Dwight will die in prison because of the sins he got. I don't see that he could outlive his sins.
20,
yeah, and he's gone. And Bobby also will perish in prison if he's convicted. He looks terrible.
You can
very unhealthy.
look. We got the two papers in front of us from
when he was arrested, and then look at that picture there.
February 28th, 2024,
Yeah.
and then August 13th, 2025. He's aged 20 years.
Yeah, I mean he doesn't look good. And,
he didn't look very good to start with.
No,
truth, but it hadn't helped.
No. He's not in good physical condition, and I like to think that's probably karma.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we're going to go to trial on that one. That again, the trial date's been set, but I still, Champ, I'm convinced that they're going to plea this one. I don't know how he can think he would get exonerated of this crime, but I think it's a first-degree murder. I think that Dwight and Bobby, from the time they snatched her, they knew they were going to have to kill her. They knew they were going to rape her, and then they knew they were going to have to kill her. And that, to me, is premeditated murder. And that's the end of it. And an innocent life was taken for no good reason other than a couple of local yahoos wanted to have their way with a woman who didn't want to be with them.
Is there any evidence that they had pulled anything of this nature before?
Yeah, I think this was right there in front of them. I do. Going back to...
Because it seems like a leap to me. It seems like a leap from... If you believe the rumors, you're a local thug and thief and drug runner, and then all of a sudden you graduate to, aggravated rape and first-degree murder.
Yeah, I think this was, I think that in all right, let's fast forward to today, and if this crime would happen right now, Chris DeGase would have these guys arrested within a day or two, if that, and they would be charged by Weatherman within another day or two, and we'd have a pretty quick trial on this, and they would immediately get convicted because the evidence is there. The witness was there, but then again, Chris Holland is the guy who found the witness.
So let's unpack Chris Holland a little bit and get a little background. I have one question maybe before that is, what do you have three? You have the Webster County Sheriff's Department, the Christian County Sheriff's Department, the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, probably the Highway Patrol, their crime labs involved, or their recovery team involved. I remember all that going on. But how much of it taking this long to solve do you attribute to the fact that you had agencies in three different departments and a state agency, and were they communicating with one another like they should have been?
No.
To do this? Unpack that maybe for the listeners.
I'll unpack it a bit. First of all, you have Roldan Turner. Roldan, great guy, super nice guy. I've talked to Roldan lots of times. Roldan, just fathom this. You have no law enforcement experience and you're elected sheriff. Okay. What do you think he's going to do with this? Well, he's going to defer, which is what he did do. He didn't take the lead on this case at any point. So Douglas, where she was abducted, they're out of the mix. So they let Steve Whitney have it in Christian County. Well, Steve Whitney, about the same time this is all going on, has got a sexual harassment case that's been filed against him by an employee. He also assigns an investigator named Rita Sanders to the case, who does a bang-up job. She does a killer job. I've interviewed Rita on this numerous times. She's a lawyer now, has been. Matter of fact, this whole experience made her leave the sheriff's department, go to law school at the University of Arkansas, where she graduated and then became a very good attorney. She had enough to charge him, but she didn't have a lot of support per her from the sheriff's department because she was at odds with Whitney. Then in Webster, you've got Bill John, who's, again, he's got his own problems, which was another series of front page stories in our newspaper at the time.
And he ran off some of his. He had some good investigators he inherited, and he ran off.
So his best investigator was C.E. Wells.
Well, Don Rowe, he ran Don Rowe
off, but he ran off C.E., who was his lead guy, and of course C.E. went to work for the prosecutor's office, but of course the prosecutor can't do anything until the sheriff's department does an investigation, and then C.E. was subsequently elected after he beat Bill John in an election in '92, and then but C.E. never really took it, because what we've later found is that she was murdered in Webster County, but that wasn't per se known. I mean, at least the witness wasn't there to say, hey, it happened here. So Webster never really tried to take this on, although Ron Worsham, when he was elected, he conducted his own investigation, and again, Ron was one to charge the banks, but he probably didn't have the evidence that he needed, because
it took that eyewitness testimony to really pin this whole thing down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what broke it loose. And so the lead for that was, in our notes, when Fred and I had spoken to Chris Holland.
When about with that?
That was about 3 years ago when he first showed up, was working the case. Chris talked to me quite a bit, and we were looking, again, through my alibis and then through the old editions, and there's quite a bit there to decompress. And Chris asked me, he said, what do you think, what's your theory? I said, well, there's no doubt in my mind. I think Bobby killed her, and I think Dwight was in on it. That's just my vibes. Just don't know why. But I certainly think that it didn't have anything to do with Terry Walker. It didn't have anything to do with all these other names that are bandied about. It's these guys. And I told him, I said, you need to talk to Bobby's son. Bobby and his wife were divorced, and there was a custodial arrangement. And in some of our notes, we had noted that Bobby's son was someone that he would have been 10 or 11 years old at the time, and just thought, hey, because when we delved into it, we had presumed that it was Bobby's custodial weekend.
So you already assumed that the kid was more than likely there.
Yeah, but did not know if he'd seen anything. But I thought Bobby had to do something with him. Perhaps he had pawned the child off on his sister for the weekend, who lives here in town. Perhaps maybe one of Dwight's many girlfriends at the time could have watched. But I thought, the kid's a bit of a problem, because, the body didn't show up for a while. It's evident that she was, it wasn't like they raped her and then an hour later killed her. They'd kept her captured for a while, because I think they were trying to figure out what the hell to do with her. They didn't know what to do. And so I thought Bobby's son is one worth talking to. And that's exactly what Chris Holland did. Chris Holland got to and initially, as I understand it, we wouldn't talk to Chris. And, but then ultimately he did. And,
what's that? So he would have been, you said 11?
Yeah, he's in his mid-40s now.
So what did that? I mean, if you can share it, what does that look like?
Well, I think he's lived a tormented life. I think he's had to carry this with him his whole life. He saw a horrible crime, and moreover, I think that through investigations and through statements and interviews, I think it's been disclosed that, of course, Bobby knew he saw and threatened him and threatened to kill him, threatened to kill his mother. And I think he was fearful. And honestly, I don't even think when Chris talked to him the first time he wanted to come forward because he didn't want to get involved. I think he's still fearful. But then ultimately, from what I understand, again, he eventually reestablished contact with Chris and said, "Hey, listen, I got to tell you something." And that's when the direct witness statements were made. And then the grand jury was called with this information. Weatherman immediately called the grand jury. He had one already sequestered. Rolled this in front of the grand jury, and it took them no time to charge him. And then now we're off the races. And again, since in the interim, Dwight has pled guilty, and Bobby's teed up for trial. Bobby's wanting to plead. I think he would have took the 15 years if they would have allowed it, but they didn't. And again, I don't know if he ends up going to trial. I still don't believe he will. I don't know what his defense would be.
How old is Bobby now?
Oh, he's got to be in his 70s, I'm pretty sure. I think it's going to be in the story.
I don't see it here.
Yeah. He and Dwight are both pretty close to the same age. I'm looking at here.
Yeah. I don't. Well, what did that day? What was that day like
in court?
When did you know something was going to break?
Well, I probably knew before the grand jury. Well, I knew in advance that they were taking this before a grand jury, because I know all of the principal players involved. I'm proud to say Krista Gase is a friend of mine. So we don't go have dinner together or anything, but I have a lot of respect for him as a sheriff, and we've done several stories on crimes down there, especially ones that involve Seymour people, and so we have a communication line open. And Matt Weatherman, I also know Matt, and I kind of know the attorney community down in Ava really well. I was a licensed private investigator for more than 2 decades, so many of the lawyers I've worked for down there, so I'm kind of in on what's going on down there. So I knew this was coming. And when I saw that it was going to be the Banks brothers, I thought, yeah, bingo, I can see that. Wiley Belt threw me for a loop, but again, I think you're going to see him wash out in this thing.
Yeah. Well, so you knew it was, I'm leading up here to this issue, February 28th, which was the next to last day in February, it's leap year that year.
Yeah.
So when they indicted, we saw the news release with the sheriffs all standing, I think down by the Dogwood Cemetery.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
And what was that like? And did you have any contact with the Workman family?
Sure. Yeah. Listen, I'm very proud to call Joanne my friend. Fred's closer to Joanne than I am. But of course they're Kelly's sister, Pam. We're close. I've known Pam for 30 years since I've been in Seymour. She's a wonderful lady. And I know Mark, the brother, as well. And so I felt good for them. I know that Pam and Joanne didn't make it to that press conference. It was a bit much. Mark was there. And actually Roldan Turner was there that day. The three that were kind of standing up front were Roy Cole and Krista Gase, and then Brad Cole, who's the sheriff over in Christian County. And by the way, an investigator from his office, a fellow named Kevin Turpin, did a lot on this case too. He worked directly with Chris Holland, and so Turpin deserves a lot of credit as well. But I think that I don't think any of this happens without Chris Holland picking this case up and maybe it's the FBI experience that comes into play, or maybe it was just a fresh set of eyes.
Right.
But Chris was very persistent and did a really good job of getting this thing to move forward. Because I wasn't optimistic when he first came around. I thought, well, you're about the 10th person who's come by here wanting to do this. I've had several different authors come by and several different retired law enforcement people that were going to do something, and nothing ever happened. So I kind of thought Chris was just a usual suspect. He had FBI credentials, which made him sound better, but man, there's something about you meet Chris Holland. The guy reminds you of Walker, Texas Ranger. He wears boots. He's got a beard. He's kind of tough looking. He often wears a vest. Looks like he could be working on the Yellowstone, and but he's bright. When you talk to the guy, you realize he's a really bright guy, and he worked well with Turpin. He worked well with DeGase. He worked well with Weatherman. He assimilated really well with these guys, and I think that also was a key. And then having Leslie Albrecht along, I think that also helped because I think she's a good investigator. So sort of a team effort.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And so often we wonder, I guess the closest parallel of a missing person case is the 3 missing women. We often wonder, as we did with the Workman case, it's crossed my mind, is will it ever be solved? Will it ever be solved? And
I didn't think it would, Champ. I no. I thought when we hit, I remember when we did a 25-year
right
story, and that would have been, 2014.
I
told Fred, I said, let's quit doing these annual revisiting. I just don't think that. I don't think they're ever gonna. It's too old. It's too cold. Everybody's dead. I don't think we're gonna.
Yeah.
I don't think she's ever gonna get justice. I think I knew did it, and I guess they'll rot in hell for that. But I think that's the only justice there's gonna be is in the afterlife.
True.
But sure shit, I was wrong.
Yeah, and I'm glad you were.
Yeah.
Glad somebody finally put it together.
Yeah.
So right now, where we are right now, we have Bobby Banks is going to trial this November.
Yeah.
And you think it's going to be pled down before then?
I do. I do not think it ends up. I do not think it becomes a full-blown trial. I don't. I don't see how John Adamick, who is Bobby's attorney, could mount effective defense. I don't. You've got a brother who's already pled and said he was part of it.
Yeah.
Now it's an offered plea, but still, you've got a witness. You've got a guy who's been a suspect since the day this happened. You've got a guy who many statements, interviews, whatever, have said he was at the Dogwood store the day of the crime. He was, he was all around the area at that time. He did it. He was going to take a plea.
Yeah.
So I think it was going to be an offered plea, which, I think is a real chicken way of it doesn't give the Workmans the apology that I feel they're entitled to. They've been languishing with this for 36 years now.
Sure.
And Stanley's dead. Joanne's still alive. But I would love for Joanne to have at least some closure where Bobby says, "Hey, listen, here's what happened. I'm going to fill in the blanks. Here's what I did that day. I regret doing it, but here's what I did." But I don't think she's going to get that. That she's going to have to just accept the fact that these guys are cowards and they're not going to admit to anything because the jig is up.
Yeah.
And some people can't face the.
Well, they've lived a lie for 36 years. I mean, you tell a lie yourself enough, you'll believe it.
Yeah, and they got to do something Kelly didn't get to do. They've got to live a full life. I mean, hell, they're both old men now, and they're both in terrible health, and they got to live their full lives free as a bird. And Kelle Workman at 24, in the prime of her life, is dead, killed, tortured, raped, and killed is the worst ending I can think of for any human being.
Yeah.
And it went on over an extended period of time. And then just to cap it all off, let's go dump her body in a deep rutted log road full of water, and let's just throw her in. Just, the worst ending.
Yeah. Discard her.
Discard her. Don't let the family have a body to look at that's intact to say their goodbyes to. Yeah. Just horrible.
Dan, if I know it's impossible in this life, but if you could tell something to Kelly, what would it be?
Well, I guess I would tell her that we here at this newspaper, myself and Fred Spriggs, who honestly, Fred worked harder on this case than me. We tried our very best to find your killer, and I do think that we played a role in finding that killer. I've had people in law enforcement, I've had Chris Holland, I've had them say they couldn't have done this without the work we had done. So I feel good about that. I can't change the ending, and actually, when I came here, the crime had already occurred. It was pretty old, but I think that we did our job in terms of not letting people forget it. And so the family had an outlet with us always to generate public awareness. And then subsequently other media outlets, when we would do things, they would pick it up.
Right.
KY3 would come calling afterwards, or Color 10, or the News Leader, or other urban outlets would jump in. So I guess, like I said, what I would say is we did our best to help find your killer, and at the end of the day, that's happened. The killer's been found. Wow. I don't think there's any doubt whether he takes a plea or gets convicted by a jury. Bobby Banks killed her, and Dwight Banks played a role in killing her, and I know that upsets the family to hear, meaning the Banks family, to hear that. I'm sorry. They did it, and all roads lead that way, and all evidence leads that way, and they can say, well, they took offered pleas, they didn't admit to anything. Well, I mean, an offered plea means that evidence exists for you to be convicted.
Right. And like you're
again, just tell the truth. Just let law enforcement know what happened that day. Fill in those blanks. Let the family, as painful as it may be for the Workmans to hear, let them know what happened to their sister, their daughter. Let them know. Did you beat on her? Did you? It's an interesting story, Champ. This is a sidebar. One thing that was in the investigative files is when they found Kelly's body, there was a shoestring tied around her waist. This isn't common knowledge. We never released it in our stories. Thought it was just a bit much, but I even have, back when Rita was there, we got a hold of even some crime scene photos. Anyway, there was a shoestring around her waist, like a rope almost. And forever and ever, I used to think, what was the purpose of that? She certainly didn't do that. And I asked Chris Holland about it, because I know he had that information, and Chris goes, well, it's real simple. It was tied around her. They had her naked because she was clothless when they found her, and they'd stripped her because they were having their way with her. But they used that rope to corral her. See, get behind her and you grab the rope, and she can't go anywhere. That was the means of holding her, or the shoestring, or whatever you want to call it. But okay, so process that into this poor girl's day: mowing a cemetery, abducted, roughed up, raped, kept alive for a while. So I don't know. It's like decide what they're going to do with her so they can rape her some more. I don't know. and then ultimately conked in the head and killed, which, is how you kill a rabid animal.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I don't think a person could have a worse death. She knew it was coming, had to. What terror, So whatever these jokers get, if they get beat up in prison, or I could care less. I hope that every day is miserable for them.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it pales in comparison to the misery they inflicted upon Kelle Ann Workman.
And her family.
And her family. Yeah, sure.
Well, Dan, I want to thank you today for sharing us this story.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot to take in, but it's also a story of hope because there is a conclusion to it.
Yeah, it's a cold case solved.
And I think that that's very important. And so I want to thank you, and we'll have to have you back. There's a couple other things we'd like to talk about, and come back to the magnificent halls of the Webster County Citizen.
Yeah, you're welcome here anytime.
They're luxuriously accommodated on the square of Seymour.
That's right. We're here in an 1890s building. We are Seymour's oldest business, champ.
Yeah. It's I remember that now, in 118 years.
Yeah, 1907.
Well, thank you for joining us today for the Wild and Woolly Ozarks.
Okay.
Be sure to follow the Webster County Citizen. Dan, how can they get a hold of you, or how can they follow the paper?
Well, we have a website. You can subscribe there. You can subscribe to our e-edition, or you can subscribe to the print edition. The edition is just PDF pages of what you'd see if you bought a newspaper. This website is webstercountycitizen.com. So it's real easy to find. And Google search Seymour newspaper. You'll find us. And love to have more subscribers. We're one of the very few. I will make a shameless plug here.
Shame it away.
We're one of the very few non-corporately owned newspapers left, not only in Missouri, but in America. This newspaper is owned by me and me alone through my company, Tiger Media. And this newspaper will, as long as I'm breathing air, not be corporately owned. It will remain locally owned. And why everything around me is corporate, we're still independent, and I think it shows in our news coverage.
I want to hand it to you, not only just covering the Kelle Workman case, but covering what goes on in Seymour, the south side of the county, and a lot of county news too. The Citizen always has great coverage, and often entertaining coverage.
Yeah,
if you know, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. So Dan, they'll get a hold of you. Folks, I want you to follow us where you get your podcasts so you can hear more exciting episodes like we've had today, and follow us on Facebook. That's where we tend to get the word out first. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank my producer, Kenneth Herron, and thank Dan Wehmer and the Webster County Citizen for bringing us the story of justice finally being served. Folks, don't forget to reach out with your Halloween tales, and always, boys, be good to the tourists.